Welcome to the Victoria PTG. I wish we could actually be in closer proximity, but maybe we'll get more people and more participation this way. So I'm going to be a little optimistic. Okay, so some things I wanted to get out of the way just about the PTG in general. All right, so for one thing, if you look at the schedule in the PTG bot, I went ahead and booked that last. So there are like three major blocks for each day for PTG, and we're taking the middle block because that seemed to be the one that worked the best. I only scheduled 3 hours because by the end of that block, it's midnight in Shanghai. So, all right, we're really pushing it for Liang Bang. But I went ahead and booked the last hour anyway. So if we do run over, we've got that. And then also, I sent out the poll about the virtual happy hour. So we'll do that at the end, like at 15:30, either Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, depending on what the poll results are. And let me just find that poll. So I sent it out to the mailing list, but here it is, just so that we have it here, where I'm greetings and introductions. Okay. So let me get a bullet. Okay, so if you haven't done that at some point today, just before 2100, please fill out your preferences, and then we will do that. Okay, and then I wanted to mention this. So the Kendall's put together some helpful virtual practices. So you might want to take a quick look at that, mainly to make sure I do that stuff. We've done the virtual mid-cycles before, but they've only been 2 hours, which we've been able to sit through. 3 hours is kind of pushing it, so we probably should take a break at some point. So feel free, if I'm trying to push too fast to the next topic and you need a bio break or just getting, overloaded, please mention it. And then if there are any other practices in there that we should be doing that I'm not pausing to let people talk or something, please let me know. So that's a useful thing. The team photo, I don't know how that's going to work. I think we'll just try to take a screenshot of everybody in blue jeans or something, but we'll aim to do that during the retrospective on Thursday. So last session on Thursday. Today I think was supposed to be dressed like a superhero or something, which I have not done, and it looks like nobody in our team has done. So you can dress however you want for Thursday, and you don't even have to wear pants.
I'm golf man.
I'm going to see you from the shoulders up. Okay, and then right, we've got 2 retrospectives. So Wednesday we're focusing mostly on drivers. So I'm hoping we'll get some good representation. But one thing I want to do is just have a special retrospective so driver maintainers and developers can give us some feedback about Cinder as a team and how we're doing, and hopefully have some good suggestions for improvements. So this is the so I just sent this out to the mailing list. So so hopefully we'll get some feedback, even if people can't be here, and we'll see how that goes. And then the general, I'll put this one here, why not? So it's basically the same thing, except I want you to focus on the team. So this is Wednesday. So they're real short. I had a manager once who used to, when he asked for feedback about, other team members, would just ask 3 questions in an email, and it was real fast to answer, but it was also kind of helpful. And it's just, what are you doing well? What should this person start doing, and what should this person stop doing? So that's basically what these are. So, just quick suggestions would be great. And then let me get and then these are supposed to be accessible in China, so we should be okay with those. Okay. Okay, and then hopefully you've got the Etherpad link. So please remember to tell me to scroll it. I guess we should record attendance somewhere. So let's just do that. Sorry to be so lackadaisical. If I could spell my name, that'd be good. All right, so please add yourselves to the Etherpad. Thanks. Thank you, Gorka. Oh yeah, and then there was that best practices Etherpad. There's also a moderator Etherpad. So I'm going to try to do that on my own, but there's some good suggestions in there that if I skip, I'd prefer not to. Okay. All right, I think that's it. All right, and sorry about all the confusion about what meeting video conferencing stuff we're using. I joined yesterday to the, I think it was the interoperability working group, and Zoom crashed on me twice. And once was so hard, I mean, it went to nothing. I had to completely reboot. So I decided not to use Zoom. So I went to MeetPad, which was sort of nice, except Jay took some time yesterday and we tried to see how you could record out of it. And it just wasn't going to work very well because what you would get would be my screen recorded instead of BlueJeans has a nice way of letting you split the screen so that you don't have to. Anyway, this is a better experience. We've used it before, so hopefully nobody minds. And that's all I got to say about that.
This way it's consistent with our other recordings, so that'll be good.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point too. So yeah, so hopefully nobody's put out that we're using a proprietary system, but
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, I mean the MeetPad was okay, but it just had some quirks. So I think this should work better. All right, and I think that was basically it. Yeah, so if you have time, take a look at the moderator guide and keep me honest about doing a good job moderating these. Okay, so today we're going to concentrate mostly on current Cinder issues. One other thing, I mean, I know people have other obligations and may need to go to other sessions. We're going to do the usual thing where we're just going to start at the beginning and go through them. So the time is always sort of a crapshoot about when stuff's actually going to start. So if there's a particular thing you're interested in, let me know or put something in the Etherpad so we know to ping you. I'm also at the beginning of each day, I want to do, since we're cramming the whole PTG where we would be spending entire days together into just a couple of 3-hour slots. So at the beginning of each day, I want to give us a chance for people to express second thoughts about stuff that went on the day before. So if you have questions about anything that you missed, that would be a time to do that. So we're going to be flexible. And then the other thing about this is, since we've done the virtual mid-cycles before, and for Shanghai, we did an entire virtual PTG after the regular PTG. We can, right, there's nothing preventing Cinder from having a follow-up meeting if that would be a useful thing to do. And the same thing with the happy hour. If that turns out to be a good experience, there's no reason why we can only be happy at one time during the cycle. So we could do that too. Okay, I think that's it. So let's move on to, great, everybody's signing up. Got a good turnout. Okay, let's go to the roundtable. So yesterday there were a bunch of sessions. Like I said, I went to the interoperability working group for a while until it became impossible. And then I spent the rest of the day trying to figure out what to do to handle the meetings. But the interoperability working group is still going on. They're sort of in charge of articulating what it means to claim that you're OpenStack as a using the brand and the trademark. But they do it by taking a subset of Tempest tests, and then the cloud has to run those tests, and if they pass them all, they can make various levels of claim about whether they're OpenStack powered or they're OpenStack compute or stuff like that. But nobody seemed to really be interested in that. I mean, from our team, from when I tried to con people into being the liaison with the interoperability working group. So I'm going to give you a link if I can find it. To if you're just curious, you can go through this slideshow real quick that I think Mark Volker put together. But it just gives you a rough idea of what the whole thing is about, why they care about interoperability, and why they've done it this particular way. So that's something to pay attention to. But right now they're formalizing the requirements. So basically what they do is they make a list of the capabilities you're supposed to have, figure out which Tempest tests test that, and then that's the suite that people run to qualify their clouds. And what they're doing is figuring out for Victoria, for you, sorry, what exactly those capabilities are. So as far as I can tell, we haven't really added anything major or new that would be something that everybody must have to be, an OpenStack cloud. We've been mostly adding, helpful things, but, not super major things. So anyway, so there's really not much for us to do there at the moment. But they are removing the Cinder v2 stuff. So any of the tests that test Cinder v2 are being removed from the test suite, which is good because we also want to remove Cinder v2. Other than that, I went to a couple of glance sessions, and we're meeting with the glance team on Friday for some stuff that impacts us. I guess the thing we discussed yesterday was a topic Rajat brought up about setting the virtual. So Glance has a virtual size image property, but it's not populated by anything. And it could speed things up for us if it were populated. So we discussed real quickly Glance populating it. There's a way to do that if you use image import, but not everything uses image import. Some people do, like Nova, for instance, will do a direct upload of images. So we're going to try to figure out a way to get that information over to Glance in a reliable way, basically it. And then that was about it. So that was what I did yesterday. Anybody attend anything interesting that they would like to share? And actually, all right, so somebody needs to remind me to do this. So we have a bunch of people here. We should introduce ourselves and do a sound check. So at least you know that your mic is actually working should you want to say something. Because as far as I can tell, nobody's mic is working. So Jay, since you're sitting there, why don't you introduce yourself? Because we have a lot of people here today, which is great. Some names I recognize and some I don't. And some names I recognize, but I have no idea what the faces are. So if you don't mind saying hello and who you are, that would be very helpful. So Jay, kick it off, please.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jay Bryant. I used to be PTL before Brian. I'm now on the TC for OpenStack, and I'm a cloud architect at Lenovo. And hopefully you heard all of that.
Yeah, I guess I should give you feedback. Yes.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
Eric, I see you up there.
Sure. Hi, Eric Harney, from Red Hat, work on Cinder. That's the usual story. I don't know. Glad to be here.
All right, so each person tag the next person to go.
Gorka.
Hi, this is Gorka Aguilar. I also work for Red Hat, and I work on Cinder, Spreak, yeah, the usual stuff.
Hey,
So
I'll just
next
say,
is
The new beard is impressive.
I am very, last time I saw you, you were
Yeah.
clean shaven, and I think that
I
was
know.
only
How
2
did you
weeks
do
ago.
that?
Wow.
just being lazy.
All right, make
This
sure
is
you
what
don't
happens.
don't shave before the team picture on Thursday. We got to get this.
All right. I think I can do that.
All right, cool.
Okay, so next one, Rajat.
Hi, I'm Vidit Dasmana. I also work for Red Hat and I'm a part of Cinder team. That's it. I can see Zach. You can go next.
Yeah, Rajat's
Hi,
also the. Oh, sorry. Just to say, Rajat's also the newest member of the core security team today. So congratulations, Zach. Sorry for interrupting.
And thank you for taking over for me.
Thanks, everyone.
Zach Sheffi. I also work at Red Hat. I'm OpenStack storage quality engineer.
Thanks for
Next
coming.
one, who's the next one? I don't know.
I can go if you want.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Simon.
Hi, Simon Dodsley, Pure Storage, Technical Director for the OpenStack initiative. And I will hand over to Adam, who's our new guy at Pure.
Yeah, hello. My name is Adam. I'm a software engineer also with Pure Storage. Right now, mostly working on our driver, but hoping to get more involved in other stuff in the future.
Great. All right, just let's see.
Sean McGinnis.
All right. Hey, everybody. Sean McGinnis. I work for Dell, former Cinder PTL, and just helping out here and there now. Who's next? Yvonne, have you gone?
Hi, I'm Ivan Kolodyashny. I'm working for Cinder when I'm not busy with Horizon stuff. Working for Mirantis mostly on bug fixing and other feature contributing Cinder and Horizon.
You're also the Horizon PTL, right?
Yes, I am Horizon PTL again for this virtual cycle.
Yeah, so you work a little bit on Horizon.
Sorry, I can't get video working today, so only audio from my side.
Okay, thanks. And thanks
Okay.
for keeping the PTG bot up to date. That's great.
You're welcome. Oh, Alan Bishop.
Hi, everyone. Alan Bishop. I'm a Red Hat person. Folks will see me occasionally drop into Cinder to do perhaps some bug fixes or minor tweaks, but that's mainly because my primary role at Red Hat is working with OOO, which folks may know is Red Hat's deployment tooling, and the deployment of Cinder. So I tend to come at it from the deployment side rather than the Cinder core feature side, but you will occasionally see my name in the code. Let's see. Next up, how about Regini?
Hi, everybody. This is Regini, and I'm from Dell EMC, working for OpenStack storage solutions. Mostly focus on Cinder, but I've been working on other stuff like OOO, Alan, coordinate a lot. So it's just me trying to represent the driver team members who cannot be. Most of them are in Shanghai, so let me see. Arthur.
Okay, so my name is Arthur and I work for NetApp and I contributing with Cinder for a couple months. Lucio?
Hello. My name is Lucio. I work with Arthur and Fernando and other guys here.
at NetApp. I'm currently working with ONTAP drivers, and sometimes I work with Manila as well. So let's have a nice PTG. Fernando?
Yep. Hello, everyone. I'm Fernando. I'm currently working on maintaining NetApp drivers, more specifically Solidifier drivers, but if anyone has some questions regarding ONTAP, I can also drivers regarding ONTAP, I can also help. So I think this is it. I've been working for 2 release now on OpenText, so not really experienced in OpenStack, but like trying to help a bit when I have some time. This is it. I should like choose someone. Yeah, maybe the last one, Ellen.
Hi guys, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Helen Walsh, work with Dell EMC and work on the PowerMax Cinder driver. I'm glad to be here. Okay, I choose one. Has Simon been introduced? Simon Dodsley?
Simon did go.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Let's see, how about going from the top? How about Josephine? Are you on? Okay. Liang, are you connected? MD Sufyan? Oh, Josephine. Okay, Josephine. No, we did not hear you. He was just in the chat. I'll have to try to get mic working. Let's see. All right, I'm going to mispronounce this. Huxon. Okay, how about Shadow Drew? I know you're there. Or at least you signed up.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Okay. Yeah, Shadow Drew, just say hi to everybody.
Yeah. How are you doing, guys?
We're good. Shadow Drew's another Red Hatter. There. Guess we've mostly Sophia. You haven't said hi. If people are having some stability problems with their connections. Okay. All right. I guess, is there anyone who didn't get a chance to speak who would like to say hi?
Hello everyone.
Oh, hi. Okay.
Actually, I'm Tushar Gite. I'm new in the Cinder project. I'm from India, NEC Technologies. So Victoria is my first cycle to contribute, and it's first time I've joined the PTG.
Well, great. Well, welcome. We're not doing an onboarding session, but let me know if you need some onboarding information. We've got some stuff that Jay had put together that could be very useful if you need some help. Great.
Yeah,
all right, please, anybody? Oh, sorry.
I was just saying, let me know if you need to run through the onboarding stuff or need a pointer to the education.
Actually, I can't say very much. I have to ask my manager, so he got through all this stuff.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Hi, Sophia.
Oh, finally. Hi, I'm Sofia Enriquez. I'm working on Red Hat too. And it's been a year working with Cinder, backups, and now volume types. So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
All right, great. Okay, some people are having connection problems, so I apologize also. All right, great. Well, welcome everybody. Please make sure your name's on the Etherpad so we just know. It looks like we've got 30 connections to BlueJeans, which is kind of nice. I guess we should probably start getting things moving along. All right, so I was in the middle of the roundtable. So did anybody go to anything yesterday that they would like to share? So I shared the interoperability working group stuff, but anyone attend any of the yesterday sessions and would like to say anything? Okay, I guess there's a point where that becomes awkward. Okay, so it looks like if during the week you have anything you want to share, please feel free to share it at the beginning of one of our days. Okay, great. All right, so we'll move over to line 86. And the way we'll do this, right, so open up the Etherpad. Everybody feel free to take notes, ask questions in there, especially if you're having problems with your mic and you can't ask a question. Go ahead and just type in the Etherpad and we'll all see it as we're doing this. We'll try to take notes in there also so that we have a record of what's been discussed. And then we'll be posting the recording of this session on YouTube in the off chance you want to go back and take a look at it. Okay, so first up today is Rajat with the security issue that's public that we need to do something about. And let Rajat explain what's going on there. Rajat, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Brian. So can I share my screen? You are muted, Brian.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I think I probably have to stop sharing the other one so you can share. Let me do that. Okay, I think you can share yours now.
I got a really good view of Gorka's beard there. That's impressive.
So is my screen visible now?
Yeah, we can see your document.
Okay. So the main point of this topic is that we have a policy in Nova that non-admins cannot show the host information, the compute node host information. So this is a link to their code about their policy that they won't be showing any host name information to non-admins. So that's part of Nova. But we communicate with Nova through volumes when they are attached. So we also get that host information in the connection info. So there is a security issue in this that non-admins in Cinder, like non-admins generally, could see the host information of Nova through Cinder volume. So it was an issue reported back before. And so as we can see, I have taken down the output of the Cinder show command of an attached volume, and we can see I have highlighted this. The host name is visible on the Cinder volume, which is attached to the Nova host. So I have put a patch for this part. Like we agreed on the Cinder meeting that we shouldn't show non-admins the post information. So I put up a patch, and after that patch, we see the information something like this. The host name gets nullified. So that works pretty well. And I have updated all the patch links on the Etherpad, so yeah, you can see from there. And so coming to the main issue that we have and we wanted to discuss is the attachments API. So what we have is the attachment API is used by Nova to get the connection info and to share, like, it uses the connection API to have communication with Cinder. So when I checked out the attachment information, then it contains some data that I think is should not be shown to non-admins. We can see that when I did the attachment show command on LVM, then we can see this is the connection info part, and I have highlighted auth password, which I think shouldn't be visible in a JSON response. So that's I think concerning. On the Ceph side as well, I can see from the attachments API, we can see the host clearly from the IP, yeah. And there is also one secret UID. I'm not sure if it's that critical or not, but at least in the Ceph response, the host information is critical. Like, it shouldn't be shown anyway. So I have proposed a patch for that as well. And what it does is this whole connection info property. So it just makes it an empty dictionary if the user is a non-admin. I have updated this review on the Etherpad as well. Yeah, so this is the overview from the Cinder's perspective. I think we will require some Nova point of view from it as well, but in the Cinder discussion, this is quite the summary of it. So I will stop sharing. And yeah, so this was an overview of the whole issue.
So I think it would be good to kind of frame exactly what the concern is here, because I think there's two different things happening. The host being shown is something we don't want to do because we don't want the volume API to reveal info about the compute deployment, right?
Right.
But the second part where you were showing authentication credentials for how to connect to volumes, I think is a whole different situation, which probably is not really along the same lines, because if somebody needs to connect to a volume, it makes sense to give them that information. So I'm not sure that the concern about the host info necessarily tells us much about the authentication credentials part.
Yeah, I agree. Right, because we don't want to require admin credentials to do something a normal user should be able to do. So if it's your volume, you should be able to connect to it. And I think CHAP was showing up in the one of those responses you showed. And I think, right, that's the protocol that will give a specific right username password just for that volume. So it's basically the user would have that information, but the only thing they could do with it is connect to their own stuff, which seems okay.
Brian, that could depend on the driver.
Okay.
That could depend on the driver. As usual, one driver may decide to use the same user password for everything. And in that case, it would be problematic.
Right. So
but I mean, what I mean to say is that the information, I agree with you, the information per se should be accessible by users because they want to attach the volume. And if you, for example, have a standalone Cinder, this could be a requirement.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a Nova service. But
So
it will depend on the driver itself if this is a problem or not.
Right. So I think I like Eric's suggestion of sort of, right, splitting this into two things and concentrating on them separately. So I think the first thing is just, we don't want to inadvertently expose stuff. We don't want to make the block storage API a backdoor into getting information about compute. So I think it makes sense to remove the host info, and I don't think that's going to impact anything, because you should know who you are if you're connecting.
The one part I don't know, so it's kind of hard for me to get a picture of what all the scenarios are that we expect people to do what is it, an attachment get API call, I guess, is what we're talking about. It might be the case that if you're using multi-attached volumes, maybe as a user, you do want to see what host you're connected to. I don't know if that's an expectation that's there or not.
Right. Okay. So, yeah. So what Nova does for that is they mask the host name. They'd make a hash of it or something, so that it's a stable. Well, I don't know if it's a stable identifier, but it's unique enough. I mean, what I mean is, I don't know if you always get the same one for every host. It's a way to distinguish one host from another without actually knowing anything about the host. If that makes any sense at all.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, my concern is that it's not super obvious what all the use cases are for users doing an attachment get. I mean, there's, the basic ones where people are just doing, they have a single instance and a volume and they're attaching it and whatever. But what information is supposed to be exposed where is a little bit less obvious to me when you get into multi-attach, or when you get into users that are attaching to ironic nodes instead of Nova and that kind of thing. Because I'm concerned that we're going to add a restriction to what we show and break something that we didn't even think about. Yeah. And I want to avoid that for sure.
I think Walt had mentioned something about, I think with the Brick Cinder client extension, you use this to make connections independently.
Yeah, but in that case, you don't need the host information.
Because you would be the
Eric is
initiator,
because
right?
you know what you. Yeah, I think Eric is referring to the case where, for example, in Nova, you cannot just detach a volume because one of the instances has stopped using it. If you have multi-attach, you have to know if you have more. For that, you may want to go to Cinder and tell it, for this volume, give me all the different connection information and see if there are others with the same host. And if there are not, you can call OSBreak to do the actual detachment. Because at some point, Nova can only call once the Nova detach, the OSBreak detach, the local one. So if it calls it when there are still attachment, it will fail and all sorts of things can happen. I think that's what Eric was referring to. That we don't know how Nova is actually doing it.
I see.
I'm also not sure in that case, is that done with user credentials or is that done with Nova's service credentials?
I think they have
What
different
part?
credentials for accessing Cinder.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
They have a different Cinder section on nova.com for accessing Cinder. So they have different credentials, not the user one, I think.
Because one idea as part of this whole thing was that we could differentiate policy for end users versus Nova service users, right?
Yeah, so in the bug report, there was also one thing that this was totally focused on Nova accessing Cinder. So the suggestion was to use admin credentials from Nova sites to access Cinder. But yeah, I didn't put much thought into how end users want to see what information. So yeah, that's one valid thing.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of a gut thing. I'd prefer to keep this user level if we can. So that, I mean, the thing that we changed, or that you changed in your earlier patch, is just we removed the host name from the volume detail request, and that seems okay because you would use, if you're going to mess with the attachments, you're going to use the attachments API. That would make the most sense.
Yeah, I think volume show was okay because no other projects were consuming that particular API. But attachments API is consumed by Nova, so that's why we need to think about it. Like it shouldn't break anything on their side.
Right. So it seems like there's kind of two questions here. One is just what does it make sense for this call to do? And then the other is what is Nova actually doing? It looks like this requires some more. I mean, I guess one way to answer that is to see what is Nova actually doing and try to figure out who else might want to do the same kind of thing. Or we just figure out what does it make sense for this attachments API to do in general, and then see what we have to do to make Nova conform. And that's just for the host name thing. Then we have the whole other issue you brought up about what's being passed in the response. But I think we want to separate those out.
Yeah, I would also like to say this was reported as a security issue, so that's why.
Yeah, I know. So, right. So Nova considers it a security issue because they don't like end users knowing anything about the right, what host they're actually on. Because in the cloud, they should be able to move you anywhere and it wouldn't matter. The only reason you need to know the host from Nova's point of view is if you're trying for like affinity or something, you want to keep right different servers on different hosts just for performance reasons or for redundancy or whatever. So that's why they just mask, they give you a masked identifier. So you can tell if stuff is on the same host or not, but you have absolutely no idea what that identifier actually maps to in terms of an actual device. So we could, so that's, so it might be, so masking it might actually be a good idea because the information wouldn't disappear. Although, I think was Gorka saying there might be a case where you actually do need to know the host information. I guess we still need to research
Nova
this.
does not need it. They use the instance ID. So what they are, I'll try to paste the link now. What they are doing is basically they get the attachment information from Cinder, but then internally they get all the instances in their own host, which they query their own database, and then they do the mapping based on the instance ID, not on the host.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep. So it's fine even if we don't return that information. Just a second, and I'll add the link to the code.
So to be safe from the Nova side, I think we can tell them to use admin credentials for accessing this attachment data. But from the end users, I think we need to get on something like what all information does an end user require, a non-admin end user.
Yeah, is anyone familiar with that use case? Or I think Walt might be the person who's done that kind of thing the most. And I don't think he's here today.
Which use case is that?
Just using the attachment API freestanding. Okay. Oh, good, here we go. Oh.
Is the host field something that we allow people to search on with the volume list filters stuff?
Let me check. That would be in that, what's that JSON file called? This should be a quick one to answer.
I'm just thinking about cases where there could be odd users, like some kind of backup software that just says, I want to back up all the volumes that are attached to host X or something. I don't know if that's a thing that exists.
Right. Okay, here's the resource filters.
I think things like Harbor and Freezer get the volumes based on virtual machine. I'm not aware of anybody that does it by host.
Yeah, it looks like for attachment, we allow filtering volume ID, status, instance ID, and attached status right now.
Yeah, but that
Yes.
source filter JSON can be configurable, so we can add new fields on it as well. But yeah, I think we can add new fields. We can configure it.
You mean by adjusting this file, or?
Yeah, we
I thought
can
this was
change.
like
We can add attributes to that file, and we can get filtering on that as well. I think so.
Okay. I thought this was kind of like a sort of the maximum stuff you could filter on. I think it might depend on which code path you take. I'm not sure. You've actually worked more on this.
Yeah, so it just rejects the filters that aren't added in this. So if we don't add it, then it will say it's an invalid filter. But if we add the attribute in this file, then it will just pass and show us the information related to that. Because it's just a DB query, so it can take any attribute, I think. Yeah, that's what I remember.
We might want to follow up on that then, because there are probably some attributes we don't want to expose. Because you get in this weird situation where you can filter on stuff even though you can't see it, and it gives you sort of a backdoor to get information that's not exposed in the API. So let's take a note.
Yeah, that's an admin configurable thing.
Oh, so, okay. All right, look, so that's.
But I think the idea is that somebody could have changed their filter config to allow doing this,
right.
assuming that works. And then it's, you know, how much do we care about that, and what does that mean?
Yeah, I guess in the other case where we pulled it out of the volume details, you could still get around it if you absolutely needed to by using admin credentials. But in this case, we don't have different. What I'm trying to say, so the resource filters isn't really controlled by policy in terms of who gets to use what filter. Well, I guess
Looking at the code, and this seems to be hard coded. I don't know if I'm looking something wrong, but the V3 API for attachment seems to be hard coded which ones are allowed.
Uh-huh.
Look for the link.
No, I think that's a different list. I was talking about if you wanted to do volume list and list all the volumes that have a host of some value.
Okay. Yep. Completely different.
That would be the filtered stuff for the attachment API, not the volume list API. I don't know. I don't want to worry about filtering all day. It's just a thing we should probably be aware of if we change this.
So, Rajat, do you have enough to go on to keep pursuing this? Assuming you want to.
Yeah, I can go forward with this, but if only the use case are clear that how it is actually used, so then I can make modifications to that code. Because right now I am just nullifying the connection dictionary if the user is a non-admin. So I think we need to think about the possible things that a non-admin user can use from that connection info.
Are we going to be removing data from existing API calls with a change like this?
Yeah.
For non-admins, yes.
So that's obviously backwards incompatible. We should probably, if this is going to move forward, it needs to be a new micro version, at least.
Well, that gets tricky
Yeah,
though if we're removing it because it's a security concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, since it's security, it's a bug fix, so it's allowable without a micro version.
So yeah, so the issue, I don't know how long you've been here, Walt, but yeah, we were sort of counting on you to.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay. Sorry this topic came up so soon. Yeah, because you seem to have the most experience using the attachments API independently of Nova or anything. So we're trying to figure out. So the first issue is just with the host name, because Nova doesn't like it that it's being exposed because they don't expose it through compute, and you can use the block storage API as a backdoor to find out what host your VM is on. So we've removed that from the volume detail response, unless you're an admin and then it gets populated. So we did that a couple of weeks ago. I think that's still in Victoria. That wasn't a new story, right, Rajat?
Yeah, it's in Victoria. But
Okay.
that also has a problem that I have corrected in a new patch.
Oh,
Okay. It didn't consider multiple attachments, so yeah, I made a code change. I put out the link. I said correction for the whole patch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a question related to this. Are we removing that information from the connector that comes back from OS Brick that goes into Cinder?
That's what we're discussing now, is whether we, yeah, what do you think about that?
No, we were talking about doing it in the volume detail, right? Not the connector.
Okay, because we can't remove it from the connector because I know since I developed the 3-part driver, the 3-part driver itself needs that information. You won't be able to do attachments without it. Coming from OS Brick side into Cinder, it needs that host name to properly know to create hosts to do the export on the actual 3-part device itself. It needs a host name that matches the host that you're attaching the volume to. So that would be a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think the driver still gets that information, right? Because when the Nova does the get connection info and then passes to Cinder, the driver will receive it. It is not being removed there. It is only when somebody queries the Cinder API and tells it, give me this specific attached information. Then it is removed. But the drivers will always receive the full thing.
Okay, that's kind of what I was asking. In which direction and which API is being called to selectively filter out this information?
Okay, this is only removed on the REST API when somebody outside of Cinder makes the call to the connection information that has already been created.
Okay. And we don't need it at all in the iSCSI connector in OS Brick for doing an attach or detach? I guess we wouldn't need it because we could find it again on the inside of OS Brick on the host side. But you just have to be careful. I guess I can look into that. I mean, you know the iSCSI connector in OS Brick as well as I do, Gorka, or probably better than I do at this point. I don't think we need it for Fiber Channel.
I'm going to double check. I think you're right and we don't need it, but it's true that we should be careful with that.
Yeah. Because this information has been around forever, and I think we might be making some assumptions and requirements based upon it. we had a discussion years and years and years ago about some of the API calls that Nova makes to Cinder because they're all public APIs, right? So yeah, at one point we talked about making some of these API calls only available to Nova for doing things like this. But that's a much bigger discussion and change. But we might have to revisit that if we need some of the stuff, and this is a security related issue that needs to be hidden as well.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Rajat, how's it looking?
Yeah, I have more information than when I started, but still I don't have a clear structure in my head about this.
Yeah, that's fine. We can revisit it later in the week if you have some ideas, or we can do it during the cycle. But this looks like a good start on things to worry about working on this. As far as I know, I mean, it was reported as a security concern, but it seems more of a protocol violation than a problem at this point. So,
well, it's a security concern because it's an information leak, just a minor one.
okay. Any last thoughts?
And does this information come back for non-admins?
Yes.
Yeah, right now it's just any user who can make the API call can get the information.
Okay. And I guess Nova, when it makes the call, it's also a non-admin.
We're not completely sure about that, but probably, I imagine it uses the user token. But they could send the service token along with it, which actually by default they probably don't. But you can configure Nova to send this service token. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rajat.
Yes, they have a group, Cinder group in nova.conf, so they can configure the user from which they want to call Cinder.
That would make it so they could configure on their side which user makes the call, you're saying?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, so there are a couple of ways we could go on this depending on what needs to happen.
I mean, don't we have problems with other related information that comes back from the Cinder public APIs? I mean, we're passing back a ton of other information that's probably more of a security risk than the host name of whatever host the VM is running on. I mean, we're passing back the initiator connector information back from the actual Cinder volume backend. There's all kinds of stuff in there that, I mean, it's all the same public APIs that has this.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, it's just that somebody happened to notice this and file the bug.
Okay. All
right. All the other info there,
I'm sorry, Eric.
I'd say all that other info though is assumed to be required to actually connect to the volume, as opposed to details about Nova and your OpenStack services and that kind of thing.
Right, but my question is if the same user has access to making the public API in Cinder that fetches the host name, then they could call initialize connection and get back all of the connection info for the Cinder backend too, which I think is potentially far more of a security risk because they get the API, the IP address of the actual storage backend, as well as the IQN and a host of other stuff.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that is part of the requirement of using Cinder. You have to be able to access the data plane and know where to go. Unless, yeah, I don't see any way of removing that.
Yeah, well, that gets me back to my original point a little bit ago that maybe that we need to have. Well, shoot, we can't even do that with this. What I was going to suggest is that the API call that Nova's making in to fetch this information needs to be a service API that is not available to users. But then you couldn't do an attachment to bare metal at the same time because it uses the brick extension, which makes all the same calls. So I don't know how to lock this down without making it impossible to actually do an attachment.
Well, if you had, I think, do we have a policy for that part? If we have it, it's possible to only allow admins and specific tenants to use it, a specific API. So you could restrict as much as you want to only allow your bare metal user and the Nova users from accessing that specific API and prevent everybody else with a policy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the default, design assumption here is that your standard Cinder user is allowed to connect to volumes. And if you want to craft a deployment where you have users that can do monitoring kind of stuff, but not actually connect to volumes, you can do that now, but it involves handcrafting policies to support it. And so I think that model is basically the right model. And I think that's kind of the standard that we've been going with for a while now.
Okay, I guess it gets back to the use case of the security information leak that Nova sees, because Nova's going to need to make all these calls to fetch this info, and we need to kind of nail down where we're going to allow this information leak, what use cases are required for it, because it's not just the host name, it's everything else too.
So in my patch as well, I have introduced a new policy for attachment get, which I didn't find before. So I think we can work out that policy part that goes up the state.
So just trying to wrap my head around what's going on. So it looks like, depending on what backends you're actually using, you may have to expose more information than others just to be usable through Cinder. So if you are an operator who's using such a backend, then you do have access. Well, you will have access to policies that would allow you to restrict who can make the calls to see that stuff. And so you could configure it. Yeah, I think you could do that. It might be very complicated. So you can make sure that Nova can get its stuff, but like a normal user can't just make the direct API request. And then if you have specific users who have some kind of need to get access to this stuff and you trust them, you can write policies to allow them to make the calls. So Because from what I can tell, there seems to be a lot of variability in what information you actually need to make the connections. So I guess, so, okay, so then even if we don't, so it sounds like even if we don't filter out stuff at this point, at least adding the policy Rajat mentioned is a good idea, so that there's some control over who can make these calls. I think that's a good agreement. And then we can investigate further after the policy's in place. So that might be the thing to do, Rajat, is to let's get the policy in place, and then that will at least allow people to do some kind of configuration to block holes if somebody finds something that's bad. But it seems like there's a lot of other stuff going on here that would be really hard to solve short term.
What other stuff would be hard to solve? Sorry.
Well, I'm thinking in terms of, right, if we could, right, if you wanted to completely hide, there's probably a way to hide the information to get to the back end if you.
Well, if you only allow admins,
yeah.
If you only allow admins,
then that's
you have with the policy, that's enough. An admin is probably also able to go to the cinder.conf and see everything they want.
Yeah. All right, that's a good point. Okay.
Although, yeah, the policies should probably be not normal admin, but the cloud admin, which are different users. Could be different users. You have an admin that it's only for a tenant, and then you have admins that are not only for the tenant, but for all the tenants. So it's different.
Yeah. Yeah, I never think of the tenant level admin as being an admin, but right.
But yeah, once the policy is in place, since the default is going to be the same as we have, that will not be a problem for the implementation. It will be a problem for whoever wants to start restricting it as much as they want. So that's fine.
So Gorka, as you were saying about the cloud admin, so on the policy side, I see the rules as admin or owner or rule admin API, but is there a different rule for that type of admin? Or
well, those rules are created in a JSON file, I believe, or in a list or somewhere, something inside Cinder. So those are, you can, when you say owner or admin, that's really a tag that we have internally defined. So let me go look the file and look for the file, and I'll put the link.
Yeah, so there's the policies.yaml is the one that you can generate now. So now we've got the policies in code, so the defaults are all defined in code. And then you have to generate the policy file if you actually want to see it and adjust it. And then as far as the cloud admin stuff goes, it depends on how Keystone is configured, what roles you get out of the box that you can use. So the admin that we're considering here is basically what I think would be the cloud admin in our default situation. And then once you want to get really crazy with stuff, you got to just redefine all the policies out the wazoo. Now they're making some changes in Keystone to have more default roles when you install OpenStack, but it's up to the services to recognize them properly. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, but that's what you're seeing in our file. So we define, like Orca was saying, we define stuff in code for how this is going to work. And then it just depends on the roles that we recognize being assigned by Keystone to particular users.
Yeah, that's not exactly what I was saying, because that's another aspect. The part you're referring to is which one of the roles, let's call it, we have for each of the policies. But another one is how those roles, like owner or admin role, how is that defined? What does that mean? And that is defined in Cinder. In a second, Cinder does policies does base.py. So if we go there, we can see how those different roles are defined. You can see that the admin or owner is admin :true or role :admin and is admin project :true. You can see that there are two different things. Is admin means that this is an administrator for this tenant, not for other tenants. It cannot do cross tenant, or it should not do cross tenant. Or the other part is within the administrator's project, this user has the administrator role. By default, Cinder allows cross-tenant administration. This is what this default thingy is doing. Which I assume, I don't know if Keystone can override this or what. Yeah, these are the two types of admins that Keystone can define. But again, we don't really care for this particular implementation, because the default is going to be whatever we currently have, which is users can modify their own or can see their own attachments. So
yes, it's just to be admin or owner for that.
Yep, for now that would be it.
Okay, so that was a pretty thorough discussion. Any last minute follow-up or anything? This Etherpad will be here, right, as long as Etherpads exist. So, feel free to come back and add questions, or if you remember something that you want to point out. So that's always possible. All right. We've been at it almost 90 minutes. Do we need to take it's 10:24? Well, 10:24, sorry. It's 14:24 UTC. Do we want to wait till 14:30 to start the next one? Or do people want to just power through? I guess I should just declare everybody should at least stand up. Let's start the next one at 14:30. So that gives everybody 6 minutes to do whatever. I'm going to keep the recording running, which sucks for people watching, but is easy otherwise.
Sounds good. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay.
Hello, Gorka.
Hi.
Yeah, you looks much cool.
Hi.
Yeah, my daughter is beside me. Yeah, it's my first time to see Eric Honey.
Yeah. It's a good
Yeah, we've
thing
got.
to have the. Yeah, that's why it's a good thing to turn on the video cameras, so at least we can see each other and see people that we don't usually see.
We'll see them in ways we've never seen them before, Gorka.
Yeah, that as well.
Okay, my clock's got 14:30. I just noticed we seem to have more people who have joined, so just want to encourage you to scroll back to the top of the Etherpad. There's some links to a couple of surveys I want to do before we do our retrospectives. We're doing a driver's retrospective on Wednesday, so I'll be focused on driver issues, and then general one on Thursday. If you have any questions, ping me in openstack-cinder outside of the meeting. That'll be fine. Okay, let's see. Now, Sophia was having connection problems before. Is she back on?
Hi.
Hi,
I
good.
don't know if you
Okay,
can hear me. Yeah.
we sure can. Okay, so Eric and Sophia are going to talk to us about sizing encrypted volumes. So take it away.
Sure. So this showed up as a couple of bugs, mostly related to migration scenarios, I think. But I'll give kind of a rundown of what the issue is here, and see what kind of ideas we have. So the root problem of what we're getting at here is that when you create an encrypted volume in Cinder, which for all practical purposes means you've created a volume that's formatted with a LUX encryption layer on it. If you say, give me a 1 gig volume, you get a 1 gigabyte volume from the storage backend, and then you format it with LUX headers, and you end up with a 1 gigabyte minus some number of kilobytes or megabytes of space that you can actually consume, because the headers to store encryption keys and LUX metadata takes up some non-zero amount of space in the volume on the back end. This doesn't normally come up too much for simple use cases, because I guess people that just ask for a volume and attach it to a VM don't usually care if it's a little bit too small. But the place where this bites us is when we start getting into migrating volumes between different types that may be encrypted and non-encrypted, migrating volumes between different backends, and maybe even something with backup and restore. I'm not too sure, but the root complaint that has shown up is that if you create an unencrypted volume and then you do some kind of migration to an encrypted volume type, it won't fit in a volume that's the same size, because the encryption overhead means that you don't have room to fill the entire volume with the space that Cinder says, is the size of the volume. So one or two people were poking at fixing this in kind of driver specific ways, which I really did not want to do because I think it may end up kind of painting us into a corner with more complicated scenarios. So I think we need some kind of Cinder-wide thought about how we handle this, and do we need to account for this specifically, as opposed to just kind of pretending it doesn't matter, which is what Cinder does currently.
Do we have a general feeling or an idea of what the percentage of overhead there is with the encryption? The percentage that we're losing in space?
I mean, I haven't measured it, but I'm assuming it's like less than 1%. And part of the tricky thing as well is I haven't gone and looked, but I don't know if it's always the same, because it may be that different versions of LUX, there's when you format a volume with LUKS, there's the normal header that contains the keys and whatever metadata it needs. And then there's a backup header that's stuck somewhere at the end of the device too. I don't know if different versions vary on how many backup copies they make. There's also the fact that we, for iSCSI and Fiber, will create a LUKS formatted volume using Encrypted setup. But if you do it for RBD, you're going to create a LUKS formatted QCal thing with, or not QCal for RBD, but for RBD, you'll create a LUKS formatted volume via QEMU image instead of Encrypted setup. It may have slightly different behavior. I don't know. I haven't gone and measured all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I guess the options so far would be the default option is we don't do anything and we tell people, well, sometimes that happens and maybe there's workarounds for some of the scenarios, but I think there's not workarounds for everywhere this shows up. So there's the don't do anything approach. There's, you know, keep track of this in Cinder somehow with knowing how much space is consumed and trying to do math to account for it. I don't really know how that plays out since a lot of backends are operating on a per gigabyte volume size scheme. I don't know what you really do if you want to say I need half a megabyte of extra space kind of thing.
It sounds like at a minimum, this should be a documentation issue on encrypted volumes.
Probably.
So yeah, so as far as we know, if you had like a 1 gig unencrypted volume and can you change the size when you retype?
I was wondering the same thing.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think you can. If you could, that would give a workaround for some of the cases.
I don't think so.
Yeah, okay.
You first need to extend and then retype.
Right. So, but if you extended the source volume, then you'd still have the same problem.
Yeah, probably.
So you need to extend the volume that doesn't exist yet before you. So I guess the workaround is you have to manually copy the stuff over with DD or something. Okay.
I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Well, the poorest man's solution would be Cinder internally does the extend and keeps track of the real size and the user size. And that way it will always, the volume will actually be 1 gigabyte larger than it should be, just to make sure that it actually fits. It's a terrible solution, but it would work.
Yeah, but for operators and users, they're going to be charged a gig more for that that they weren't expecting potentially, even though that the only real way to solve this is by adding that extra gig anyway.
Not necessarily, because if they are charged by the user size, then it's still the same size. Because because nobody's charged based on somebody going to the storage array and actually checking and doing the mapping. So if Cinder still says that this is a 1 gigabyte volume, even if it's using more in the backend, that part would not be a problem. The problem would be that you suddenly have less space if you have thick volumes. Less available space, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
and then user administrator would say, this is terrible because I ran out of space just because of this.
Yeah, it sounds like there'd be a scam where you could get free space by judiciously retyping your volumes.
Yeah.
But I guess
not really, because I don't think it could be that easy, because the way we are doing it, you have your disk, and then when it's encrypted, you have your header, your data, but you do a DM. You create a device mapper from it. And that has a very specific size. And you cannot just go beyond that without going and doing operations on the host itself.
I don't know if that holds for Ceph and NFS.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, those two cases could be different, probably.
So do we have a short-term workaround for this, or it sounds like we don't really?
Well, since a lot of the generic migration between backend stuff is still kind of new, I think we are just relying on the fact that not a ton of people are doing it yet. We probably need to test the ins and outs of this to figure out what all the failure scenarios actually are. Because I'm not even sure what happens in the backup and restore side of things.
Yeah, I'm thinking the backup should be okay because you'd have, as long as you don't change sizes, because if you've got an encrypted volume, we know it fits in its space. So if you back that up, it should be okay. And if you restore it, you should be okay. I guess the operative thing being should, and then the other thing being, I don't know about Ceph or NFS or anything. So it sounds like we need Sophia to continue writing tests that fail so we can figure out the failure scenarios.
Yes, I don't know if. Oh, sorry. Continue.
No, I'm sorry. You go ahead.
Yeah, just I don't know if there is any easy way to calculate the encryption header and I don't know, ensuring that the volume remains equal inside. Sorry. But yeah, it is really, I don't know, a simple solution to this, really. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it might be good just to have tests in place so we can try them against like different backends, like Ceph and NFS, just to see what happens. Then we can at least document, don't do this, and expect it to work for now while we're figuring out what we really need to do. It seems like allocating space in 1 GB chunks is kind of a problem because the header is going to be way smaller than a gig, but in a lot of cases, we don't have much control over just getting the right amount of space.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the header can normally be expected to be like 1 or 2 megabytes.
It sounds like if we added a new API for allowing the volume size to change during a migration, which should be possible because basically when you're migrating, you're creating a new volume on the back end.
Yeah, but
So you
that
could
doesn't,
specify the size.
that makes sense on migration. I don't know, in the retype case where it's supposed to be a pretty generic looking thing that may or may not actually migrate, that gets kind of clunky looking.
Is we doing the retype the same thing that we do now, or do you say that you allow it to migrate? You could also say that you allow it to increase in size if necessary, right? It's, again, it's not great, but if we look into the cases that Eric mentioned of NFS and Ceph, to make sure that there is no way, or at least we cannot find a way for the users to exploit it and have extra space, that could be a solution.
I also don't
Nasty
know if we
one?
really have a way to determine the if we need to part.
Yeah, my guess is that it fails basically after it's filled up the disk and there's nothing left.
Right.
So that's really late in the game. But I don't know how you would be able to do it any other way.
Well, for I don't know, if you have two block volumes, it should be pretty easy. You just have to check the size of the device before you have done the device mapping of the encryption, right? Check the actual bytes, and the new one needs to be at least bigger.
But by how much though? You're not going to know until you've actually started encrypting, and the type of data that you get encrypting could cause an increase of, certain percentage more than it would be if it was just a text file or something. I don't know how you would calculate that.
I don't know either, but I'm sure that it's not a random number. I mean, I don't know about the encryption headers, but I'm pretty sure we are generating them in the same way always, or at least we only have 2 or 3 different ones. The one we do directly, the one when Libert does it for RBD. So we can probably know.
Yeah,
general.
we can figure out a worst case cap on it, which would not be very big. And I don't think it's data dependent. I mean, I think the data usage stays the same size for all the data. It's just about the allocation of space for headers.
You don't think the actual data that we're encrypting is going to increase the space requirements? Because it's going to take extra space to encrypt data.
I don't think Lux does. I mean, I think it stays the same size regardless of what it is, because it doesn't try to do any compression or anything. And in most encryption schemes, anything that would vary size based on the data coming in would be some kind of cryptographic weakness that would give you info about the data and that kind of thing. So normally that's a goal to avoid that anyway.
That could solve the retype thingy, but I see here that Josephine added some comments regarding that the image upload, download, and all that stuff is also affected.
Yeah, it's the same kind of problem.
Yeah, but what I mean is that the retype can be solved the way we just described by passing an additional parameter saying you can increase the size, but for the image, we probably need a different approach or some other thing, or pass the same parameter of, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, for the image stuff, you would basically want to look at, there's an optional property for minimum disk size on some images, right? So we would always just assume that the requirement for space is whatever that size is that we know the image is, plus a few megabytes. So it's a whole different path, but I think we could check it and probably just, well, I don't know if we'd want to fail or just make it work or what, but I think there is something reasonable we could do there on that path too.
And this brings us to something you mentioned earlier, Eric, about how different backends, how to tell different backends only to increase by a couple of megabytes. Some backends may not be able to do that, and they have to increase by the full gigabyte. So, and in any case, we are, I think we are currently telling drivers the size in gigabytes, and not in a float number or in bytes. So this could probably be problematic, right?
Yeah, that it does kind of make me wonder if we would benefit by having the ability to create volumes on backends that could do it that aren't rounded to gigabyte boundaries. Because for some backends, that would be pretty ideal for this. But I don't know. Well, for one thing, I don't know how many backends can and can't do that. Really.
We may be able to solve this by adding a new method to the driver interface that allows us to create a volume describing the desired size. So if the driver has that method, we assume we go that way. If it doesn't have it, we just increase internally the size by 1 gigabyte. And it's wasteful, but at least it works. And we have the generic way, which could be that one, and the optimized one, which is specify exactly the size.
So if you round up, can you round up the size when you're doing a retype or migration like that without the volume actually getting bigger for the user?
That's why I was saying that we would have to have two sizes, the user size and the real size. They are different things.
Yeah, but the user size is what they requested, but when you actually attach it, I'm not sure that's what you're going to get. I don't know that we have a way to say attach a 3 gig volume, but make it only appear as a 2 gigabyte block device. I'm not sure if that's a thing that we can really do.
Well, if this is only for encrypted, so what you would have doesn't allow you to define how much of the space this you actually want to partition, let's say, in encrypted volume, or it, because that would be the way to do it. You define your lux partition to be the user size, so that they actually have just the amount that they have requested.
And if we were able to do that, then I guess we would need some flag on the volume that tells you that yes, this is aligned to the exact size the user asked for or not, so that you would know what to do when you migrate it.
I gotta say, this is starting to sound really complicated, but especially from terms of like bookkeeping, right? Because I imagine most people are charging based on the reported gigabyte size. And it's, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, but so it seems weird to have a reported size when you're actually using more space.
Well,
We charge based upon the reported size in the quotas.
Right, but you'd be consuming more. I mean, and if it's
that depends on. So let's back up even further than that, and so I guess it would be good if we knew design goal wise. Is the requirement to actually, when a user says, give me a volume of X gigabytes, is the design aim to make sure they always get one that holds that many gigabytes, or can we give them one that holds a little bit less than that? Because which way we lean on that kind of can change the concerns around accounting and quota stuff.
Well, since we are using images and usually we know the exact size of the glance images, users will probably want the size they have requested to make sure that the images can actually fit.
I would agree, except for the fact that we don't get that currently, and we don't really get. It's been wrong in that way forever, and we don't really hear complaints about it. So, which is kind of strange, but there's a data point.
That's also true if when you buy a real hard drive and install it and you say, well, this is supposed to be a 4 terabyte drive, but it's actually slightly less than that at times. I mean, there's always some overhead with respect to that. And the usable storage is not always the same. But in this case, we're getting a failure because we can't actually store everything that the previous volume could.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Walt that my intuition is that if you ask for an encrypted volume, you're going to expect that the full usability might be smaller than what you requested because you got overhead. So as long as the migrations didn't fail, then I think it would be okay.
I don't think that's the problem. The problem is that you have a volume with a specific size, and what we would do is for normal volumes, non-encrypted, we would reduce the available size so that they can always be migrated to encrypted. That's what I understood.
Well, and yeah, it gets weird because if you adjust things to make sure that migration works, then you end up
you may end up breaking current deployments because they currently can write an image and suddenly maybe they cannot.
Right.
So what's the use case for a non-encrypted volume anyway? I'm wondering whether we should just require everything to be encrypted all the time. I guess we can't because not everything supports it.
I mean, there is
performance.
The unfortunate case on this is that it fails when you're retyping from unencrypted to encrypted, which somebody would want to do because they have volumes that they want to increase the security of. And that is unfortunately a fairly valid case.
Yeah. And does this failure happen on non-full unencrypted volumes? I mean, it seems like we would run out of space on a retype if the original volume was pretty much 100% utilized.
Well, I think the place that this originally came up was maybe in generic migration stuff where you're migrating to or from Ceph and LVM. And when you're doing, that ends up being a non-optimized migration path where
That's basically a DD the Cinder does.
yeah, I think that's what actually kind of failed on one of these bugs is you just see DD says I'm out of space on one of the LVM bugs related to this.
Oh, because DD is going to try and DD every byte that's allocated for the original drive. So it may be empty, but
yeah.
Yes.
Well, it seems like the most promising thing, at least short term, would be Gorka's suggestion about adding the flag where we allow resize just as we allow migration when you do a retype.
Yeah, the weird thing that happens there is then you end up with, if you have a volume that's X gigabytes that you just create, and then you have a different volume that's X gigabytes that you have migrated, they're not the same size, which is, maybe that's okay, but it's definitely odd.
well, I don't think we should do anything behind the user's back in this case. I think if anything, we should be explicit and upfront. And the user's going to try and do a retype. It's going to fail because there's not enough space. So, if we added an API or a flag, no, it'd have to be an API to specify a new size when you're retyping. It's up to the back end to create the new volume with the new size during that retype. And so that way the quota can be updated, the usage can be tracked, and the user can be charged because they should be charged. It's going to take up more space encrypting a volume than it is being unencrypted. So it should be charged for it. I don't know.
Well, and just for the sake of completeness, I keep wondering what happens if we let some drivers actually create, partial gigabyte volumes to account for this. It'd be really nice for people using just those drivers, but I don't know if that opens up another can of worms. If you're migrating to a backend that will just create a volume plus a few megabytes of space, I don't know what all the implications of that would be.
Yeah. My guess is that the drivers would have to change quite a bit. And how many megabytes extra do they need to create in this case to cause it to not fail? And is it just going to turn into a